So, Mr. Bur-
Recording has begun.
My apologies. He's on his way. We were trying to see if he was perhaps on another channel. He's not. Just a few minutes, but we can. Uh, we may want to wait for him if that's your preference. Very good.
the chairman of the Board of Appeals. Are we talking? Okay. And who else is with me?
Maynard Thorne.
Jonathan Burrs.
Thank you. And we already approved the minutes.
Yeah.
From last time. I see I have two.
Yes.
All right. So we have a public hearing today on Board of Appeals case number 000-618-2022, 6670 Crane Highway. And I will open the proceedings. We will review, the next is review of the, well, I don't recall reading these in the minutes in the past, but I'll do this on Town of Plata Board of Appeals. Public hearings will be conducted in the following manner. At the discretion of the chairman, speakers' comments may be limited to 3 minutes and time may not be yielded. If you are joining the public hearing virtually and wish to speak for the record, you must announce your name when joining. Do we have anybody virtually?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
And keep your phone, et cetera, et cetera. Town clerk will add your name, et cetera, et cetera. It's not really going to apply here. Obviously, we have written documents for the record and et cetera. So the town clerk will review the public notice.
Mr. President, the advertisement was placed in the Maryland Independent 15 days prior to this meeting. All contiguous and adjacent properties were notified by certified mail, and signs were posted on the 3 roads surrounding the property: Baltimore Street, Charles Street, and Crane Highway.
All right, and the presentation of the staff report by Director Harrington. Hi.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. For the record, Janine Harrington, Director of Planning for the Town of Plata. So this project is located at 6670 Crane Highway. That is at the intersection of Route 301 or Crane Highway and Charles Street or Route 6. The existing zoning is commercial highway. The existing use and proposed use as presented is a gas station. The size is approximately 1.032 acres. To the north is a commercial highway, which is commercial property. To the east is central business, and there's the Charles County government property and Baltimore Street directly abutting the rear of the property. To the south is central business commercial, and to the west is commercial highway, also commercial uses. So the applicant has submitted an application for a variance relating to the rear setback requirements in Chapter 191, the zoning code. The request proposes to reduce the rear setback from 25 feet to 5 feet. The proposed development is to demolish the existing gas station and rebuild in accordance with the dash-in branding that they've come out with. The current building sits in the middle of the site with gas pumps on either side and a car wash towards the rear of the property. The proposed development will remove the existing car wash and build a 3,400 square foot convenience store with 6 gas pumps up closer to Crane Highway. So in order to apply for the criteria for approval and findings under the variance section of the code, they do need to meet the conditions that are listed under 191-54, B1, A through F. And so it says no variance shall be granted unless the following requirements and standards are satisfied. I won't read through all of those, but I'll get into my staff comments. So in accordance with Town Code Section 191-54, the variance request will not be contrary to the public interest and will improve safety of the vehicular access on the site. The fuel station is permitted by special exception in the commercial highway zone, and they did receive approval for that in 1992. The unique ingress-egress on the site from Charles Street and Crane Highway does create a hardship to meet the minimum requirements contained within the zoning code. A portion of the property fronting on Charles Street was dedicated to the state as part of the 1992 special exception approval, and the proposed layout will improve visibility of vehicular traffic and improve the ingress and egress onto the site. So staff is recommending approval to allow for the variance to the rear setback requirements as shown and detailed in the staff report and in accordance with the adopted town plans. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have of me. And then we also have the applicants here if you'd like to have them present.
I do have a question. The rear setback, which of the adjoining properties are going to be affected by the reduction of the setback from 25 to 5 feet?
So that would be the Charles County government property that has Baltimore Street directly to the rear.
Okay, and what is currently in the space that's going to be,
The car wash.
well, the car wash, right, but is there anything between the car wash and the government property? Or like, or is that the, how much is there already?
I'm not sure what the existing, if you have the existing.
So I think,
And we can move on to the presentation from the applicants, if that would be easier.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the footage is from the property lines, but there is a thin strip of trees that's in between Baltimore Street and the property in question.
Okay, and this would basically, I'm asking, the strip of trees are on the Exxon property, not the county government property.
It's
Okay,
on the Exxon property.
do you have a question?
I do when,
No, that was my main question, I think.
Do we have the site plan on the agenda? Can we bring that up?
I mean, if you're going to the site plan, then, if you can, bring up Exhibit B. That's just page 38.
It should be the variance exhibits.
B.
Next one.
Mhm.
That's it. So looking at this, we're talking about the very top part there.
Correct. And that's the plan for the new.
Right.
Okay. And just to be clear, I can see a diagonal line across the top coming down towards the right. Is that actual Baltimore Street? Or is Baltimore Street abutting directly into where the edge of the property is?
That's New Baltimore right there.
Baltimore's up there.
So the dashed line that you see on the site plan is what the setback should be. That's a 25-foot setback.
And this is going to result in the permanent removal of the car wash, or is it going to be moved, like rebuilt somewhere else?
I believe you've stated permanent removal.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay, so it'll be the dashing structure and no car wash,
Correct.
correct? Okay, with the reduction of the footage, how's that going to affect fire department access?
It should not affect the fire department access. All the existing ingress and egress will remain the same.
Okay. And then on Exhibit D, if you can pull that up. Okay, looking at what it appears that at one point there was already a reduction of space that says 20 feet. You see what I'm looking at? I guess it'll be, if you're on 301 facing the building, it's to the left of the entrance. Oh, move the mouse to the right, Oh, too far.
Oh.
Up a little bit. Yes. What is that?
So that was a setback, I believe. 20-foot setback. That was the original plat for the site. And that was showing a 20-foot setback at that time.
So the Exxon got a variance already.
They got a special exception approval for a gas station,
Okay.
a fuel station.
Okay.
So the use is already approved on the site. We're simply looking at the location of the building and the rear setback.
Question? Do you have more?
No, that answers it.
So I just had a couple questions. I'm a little confused when I read through it, these 69 pages. So I've noticed like a couple of contradictions. One, we're talking about the size. I see some places 1.032, then I saw another place it's 0.032. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound right because I know it's bigger than that. I've walked that property, so I know it's bigger than that. Uh, just for example, on page 29, first paragraph, it talks about 0.132 when I thought it was 1.032. If you see what I'm talking about.
I believe it's a typo.
Okay, so it is 1.032.
Correct.
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to point out, on the same page, for site location, okay. Route 301 runs north and south. Route 6, which is Charles Street, runs east and west. So the actual placement of this is north of Charles Street, east of 301.
Correct.
And here it's not that, it's not what's being shown. Here, this whole thing is talking about the opposite, really. They're saying it's north of 301 and west of 6.
Oh, so it's saying that it's on the northbound. So if you're going northbound on 301, it's on the northbound side.
But
If you're-
it's not on the northbound side of 301.
If you were driving north, it will
Right.
be on the northbound side. You could turn into it on the northbound side. And then if you're driving westbound on Route 6, you would turn into the property going westbound.
Okay, so we're
That's
not
what
talking about geography, we're talking about driving then.
Correct. So yeah, if you're driving northbound on Crane Highway, you would turn into the property that way. Or if you're driving westbound on Route 6, you could turn into the
Okay,
property.
thank you. Okay, so 1992, you guys had a special variant.
Special exception approval for the
Special
use,
exception for this to put the gas station there,
to approve the use.
to approve the use. At that time, was there a request for a variant for the 25?
No,
Because according to this policy, the 25 is from the furthest back building. That would be the car wash.
it's from the rear property line. So you would go from the rear property line in 25 feet. That would be the rear setback. So that's where the building, that's the closest to the property line that the building could be located.
Right, but that's the food center or whatever it's called in between the pumps. That's where that is. But that car wash is inside that 25. It's already breaking that 25-foot line.
So that would be an accessory. I'm not sure how that was handled back at
Right,
that
and
time.
that was my question was, do we know if that was part of that 92 agreement or not?
I do not.
Because the only reason I asked that is because if it wasn't part of that 92 agreement, then that dash or Exxon, whatever you want to call it now, is, how do you say, it's a hardship that they've made. Does that make sense?
So the hardship in this case is as they were, when you look at this site and you're trying to accommodate safe pedestrian and vehicular traffic on the site, when they did this special exception approval, the State Highway Administration took an easement, took some of the land away from them, and they put that entrance in there on Charles Street. So when you have the ingress and egress where you have it located on 301 and on Route 6, if you put that building in another location, you can create some unsafe vehicular traffic.
I agree. I'm with you on that. I believe about the safety stuff. What I'm asking is, when we look at the back seat line, right? It's 25 feet in. Is where that building is supposed to be, no closer, correct?
That's according to the zoning code, correct?
Right, according to zoning code. But it doesn't, the problem is there are two buildings on that property. There's where you have the station and the gas, where the gas pumps are, and you have your mini store right now. Is that correct? That's one. And then you have a car wash, which is a second building. Is that correct? They're just attached. That 25 feet in is supposed to be from the farthest back building.
It's from the rear property line, not from the building.
Correct.
To the farthest back building.
Right. So from the back line inwards onto that property, right? 25 feet.
Right.
So
That car wash is inside that 25 feet already. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So this, right now, what we're looking at, what we have to decide is this a self-inflicted hardship? Because if it is, then a variant can't be granted based off of this policy. Does that make sense?
So the idea is that they are demolishing the entire site. They're going to be rebuilding
Right, right. But they're going to rebuild and they need this variant to do that.
with the location and layout, yes.
Right. But to grant that variant, it has to be a non-self-inflicted hardship, which is what this car wash is.
well, let's do this. Director Harrington, can we go through the staff analysis of the statutory requirements?
Okay, so under section 181-54, no variance shall be granted unless the following requirements and standards are satisfied. So A is the appellant must show that the variance is not contrary to the public interest and that such a variance will be in harmony with the purposes and intent of this chapter. B, a variance will not permit the establishment of a use which is not permitted in this zone or in that zone. And again, this was approved by special exception, so it is a permitted use.
Mhm.
The hardship is not shared generally by other land or buildings in the area. The hardship is not self-created or self-imposed and must result from the strict application of this chapter. Greater profitability, lack of knowledge of the restrictions and other variances granted under similar circumstances shall not be considered as sufficient cause for a variance. And finally, the Board of Appeals may prescribe any safeguard or impose conditions as deemed necessary to secure substantially the objectives of the requirements as varied.
So my understanding of what the hardship here is that because the property is located on the corner of Route 6 and Route 301, a significant chunk of it is under the road and the sidewalk. Is that correct? And so because the county and the state require the ingress and egress, this is essentially the same problem that they had catty corner at the supposed Panda Express that we're still waiting on, where they only had one entrance and egress, and this board with a prior, before I was chair, and with a prior membership, approved their special exception to add an ingress off of Route 6 going into their, essentially the opposite of what this is. So it's my understanding that the hardship is that because of the 25-foot setback, they won't be able to construct this design with the main building where they want it because they don't have enough room. Is that correct?
Correct. If they were to locate the building, they have a 45-foot front setback that they have to meet. And if you put the building up closer, you're going to have conflict with vehicular access turning into the site.
And so the question with regard, I also have questions about, so if we don't have, I'm not sure if counsel for the applicant, the appellant will know, but the sort of legal status of the accessory building, which is the car wash, if that counts as an accessory and was a special exception granted for that, or a variance in the past already granted for that, or is the property in violation by having a structure built within the 25-foot setback at this point, which may or may not be a moot issue considering the whole thing is going to get torn down and rebuilt, and so the you know, the setback issue as it is now, I agree with my colleague that if you were coming in here after the fact asking for permission to have the accessory within the setback, having built it there without permission, I might say no, because that is something that is a self-inflicted hardship. But that's different than tearing down the whole thing and building a new building, in my opinion,
Yeah.
in that location. So I think that I'm not so concerned about that being an issue because of the new plan, but I think that might be, is that a fair way to state what
Yeah.
your concern was?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So actually it's on, it looks like it's on page 59 of 69 of the packet under the previous special exception approval from 1992. It's under paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fifth paragraph, the second from the bottom. As shown on the site plan and testified to by representatives of Exxon, the proposed special exception use will consist of 6 gasoline pump islands, a 24 by 46 building housing a convenience store, and a 21 by 35 automatic self-service rollover car wash towards the rear of the site. And then it talks about the canopy and so on and so forth. I will note that there are, so at the time that this was approved in 1992, they had a front yard of approximately 55 to 65, side yards of 25 or 20, and a 55 side and a rear of 135. I guess that was a lot. Those are the lengths. So I'm not sure if it talks about what the setbacks were, but I will say that the setbacks for commercial property has changed since 1992, so it may well have been in conformance at the time. And it may be an existing non-conforming use as far as the car wash goes, but we also do have separate setbacks and requirements for accessory or temporary uses. So that may be in play as well.
No, I appreciate, I just wanted to draw that out because it had me a little concerned when I was looking through it and I was like, wait a minute, did we already violate ourselves?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, so I understand. And I have one more question I really have, and I have to follow up with my colleague over here was, with the new building being put into place, it's going to be, you're talking about 5 feet between that building and the slope and the sidewalk behind, not even sidewalk, but curved side behind that building. Is that a safety issue? Is just being 5 feet, people have to egress out of there? Is there places for them to go? Because the first thing they're going to do is hit that steep behind your building. It's only 5 feet from your door you're going to open up. And then I think that's where you're leading to, where how's the fire department going to get
Yeah.
through the back?
That's what I'm concerned
Into
with, the
that.
fire department.
That's where I was following up on his with.
So the concern is about fire department access to the interior of the building
The building.
from the rear, if there is one, rather than to the property
Correct.
in general.
Yeah.
That is a good question.
And I says, if you look at,
And I don't know if it would be helpful to take testimony now from the applicant, from the appellants. We can do that as well. I'll open the floor for testimony at this time. I apologize. We got into the weeds a little sooner than usual. Like I said, this is our first in-person meeting with this board, so it's been a while.
Got it. Good evening. My name is Mark Mudd, a lawyer on behalf of Dash and the applicant. And number one, I want to appreciate y'all being here this evening and staff putting this thing together. Two, I appreciate questions you all just had, and we have a script to address those issues. Ultimately, I do want to indicate as to the variance issue. I think that Ms. Harrington indicated it. Special exception is what approved that. So it's not as if we built it thereafter. So I hope you're comfortable with that. Happy to, so understanding we're in person, feel free to interrupt me and stop me. But ultimately, what Ms. Harrington, my intention is to give you a brief opening statement and then to put some testimony on before the board. Okay. And so the matter today is only a variance request. That's all we're asking for today. And the request is to reduce the rear 25-foot setback as current down to 5 feet. I think you will appreciate what that is. And so the variance tonight is our first move, okay? And it's being done in anticipation of doing a rebuild and remodel of the entire site. And so tonight is not an approval of a site plan or design or renderings, for example. All those matters for which we want to finalize, we can't figure out what's going to fit on the site until we figure out how much space we actually have. So tonight's request is, can we get this much space? And once we hopefully receive a positive finding. Then what comes back before the town would be the site plans and the review and the facades and the safety issues. Again, this is our first step to turn our potential concept plans into a reality. So tonight I have present with me tonight Renee Montgomery of Dashin Property, the applicant behind me, and Dashin is owned by the Wills Group right here in downtown La Plata. Also is Bhupendra Prakash, an engineer with the Plan Source, seated to my right. I intend to offer Mr. Prakash's testimony to give you a relation to the site, to understand what it is we're asking for, why we're asking for it, and I think it's going to answer several of those questions that you all just asked. In that regard, I'd like to go ahead and, do you all want to swear Mr. Prakash in? Do we do that at these hearings?
I think we should. I also actually, I want to, before we proceed, because Dashin is being owned by the Wills Group. I do know some of the Wills. My wife is very good friends with Beth Wills, who just moved to Pennsylvania. I do not think that my acquaintance with them is going to affect my ability to make any kind of fair decisions today. But if anybody has any objection, I just want to make sure I put that on the record. Does anybody have any objection to
No
me hearing
objection.
this as part of this board?
No objection from the applicant.
Well, I didn't think so, but nobody else is here. So I just wanted to make sure that was on the record. And we can proceed. I think we would want to swear in any witness who's going to testify.
Okay.
Oh, did the county clerk leave? Bubble behind?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, town clerk.
I'm not going.
Craig.
I
Craig,
apologize. I've never done that before.
okay. Well, can we swear the witness or do you want me to do it?
I think you should do that because
Thank you.
I've seen you do it before and I've never done it before.
All right, can you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear under the penalties of perjury that the truth, or the testimony you'll give today will be the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay. So I've handed to Ms. Harrington, she's handing to you all two documents, one of which is an aerial photograph and another one for which I refer to Mr. Prakash as Boop.
Yeah.
And I suggest everyone else can call him Boop. If you're okay with that.
Yes.
Boop, if you could explain to the board the existing site's current setbacks and the requested area of the variance. And
I will start with a general statement. Good evening, members of the board and all here. It is not out of greed that we come here to ask you for this variance. It is strictly out of hardship, and it is not self-imposed. And if you allow me, I will explain. The large drawing that you have in your hands, you will see I have identified in red hatch an overlay of the code variance that governs this property. If you look in the front at Crane Highway, that setback is 45 feet. And on top of that, this property serves in a co-sharing way an interparcel connector with the adjacent premises, the Valvoline premises, and that is shown in the long lighter dash. So anything in that red zone in the front, keeping in mind this whole, when you lay out a store, you start from the front. Close to 50 feet of the front is not usable to us. And the blank space or the white space left is only about 55% of the land of the 1 acre plus. But the bigger hardship that we suffer here is that at some time, just immediately after the special exception in the 90s, this property, 10 feet of it was taken away to widen Charles Street. And along that 10 feet, a diagonal right-in, right-out entrance was built and required. So now what that does, it actually bifurcates the property. If you can look, where the canopy is, we will call, let's bifurcate it. That is called a forecourt. And we cannot pull that building forward in the middle of this entrance. In fact, if you pull that building forward and we don't ask you for a variance, all sorts of problems will develop. The right turn vehicle will collide with the vehicles parking in front of the store. So it is necessarily pushed back to keep free flow traffic. If you bring that building forward, you will have a backup on Route 6, and you will not have safe vehicular or pedestrian circulation. So this is not greed. This is a public, don't want to be harsh to say it's an imposed hardship, but it is caused by the public widening and the public taking of this property. Now, in the 1990s, when the store was built, the oil company wasn't caught on. It is in the 1990s that the ADA Act was established. But old designs, now this is more than 30 years old, had everything happening under the canopy. You had the store under the canopy, and you have flanking the store, a left side and a right side, vehicles and pedestrians conducting their business. And in the old legacy 1990 layouts, pedestrians are crossing perpendicular to the fueling vehicles, 2 rows of them. And the cashier inside that under the canopy building cannot have a 360 view of the sales and safety operations. Keeping in mind, this is a fuel station. Safety is of paramount importance. When pedestrians are in the old style, crossing traffic perpendicular, vehicular traffic perpendicular, that is not as safe as what we want to do today. 32 years later, we want pedestrians to conduct their fueling operation under the canopy and walk parallel with traffic. And we want the cashier inside the building to have 360 vision of that entire canopy and all forward customer and vehicular interaction. This is a safety concern that we would like to address. And we have to keep that building separated from the canopy because the right in, right out entrance literally bifurcates the forecourt operation and the rear court operation. Now, I would like to take this time to advise you that that car wash, whether it's moot or not, is not sitting there illegally. It actually meets and exceeds the current rear yard setback. Now, in terms of fire access, may I speak a little bit more?
Sure.
In terms of fire access, the entrances are already designed and approved by the fire marshal for safe ingress and egress, not only to this property from Charles Street or from Crane Highway, it is also for the purpose of the Valvoline adjacent property. Now, you may want to ask, how does the fire marshal get to the back of the property? Imagine this, as in any small town or town center design, a building is allowed to be up to the street with practically no setback beyond the sidewalk. You can fight the fire from the street, or you can pull the hose from the hydrant, and we have 5 feet available to us in the rear. Normal, safe, accessible pedestrian width is 3 feet. We have 5. Now, there's another, I wouldn't call it hardship. You see, the town has all these red line restrictions, as you see here, in terms of setbacks. The federal government also has certain restrictions. Granted, these days, 30 years later, we're now selling more brands of coffee and perhaps more brands of beverages. But every time we stack them, we are required to as you know, make wheelchair accessible clearances between each vending shelf, which we call gondolas. So we get to a point where if you have more shelf, you need another corridor of 3 feet accessible. The cashier in the small building can live with, can work under the old rules in a small cubicle. Now the cashier need a wheelchair accessible, 5-foot clearance internal. So the store is getting bigger and deeper only, well, I should say first, because we are selling more coffee and more beverages, and we will have a kitchen of fresh foods. But there is an overlay here of the town's imposition of the setbacks in this red line. And then what you're not seeing is a federal imposition of internal separation of aisles, and our freezers and coolers are getting wider for wheelchair accessibility. So in summary, I would say, starting with the front setback, the required county enforced interparcel ingress egress between this property and the Valvoline property, the necessary and imposed setback between the canopy and the store due to the location of the entrance, and the interior code requirements of the ADA clearances, and our willingness to serve the public with a better assortment of fresh foods made to order and a wider assortment of beverages, we are left with no space in the rear. The fire marshal will have his or her review of this plan, but the first step is that you at least conceptually and agree at this variance level that we utilize 5 feet of that 25-foot that you see hatched in the rear. And with that, I can take any other questions that you have.
Well, I must be a much better lawyer than I thought. When you get to ask one question, you get that answer. It rolls through all of my issues. I think, Mr. Prakash, you addressed the gentleman's fire department concern. Happy to expand on that, but just to reiterate, fire department concern will be dealt with during your site plan review.
Yes, it will. We have several.
And building permit. Okay.
We have several months of detailed review at Janine's office and the entire town to go through a site and development permit, but we can only start from here.
Okay, and just to continue to orient the board, the rear of this property will in fact abut a public road. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, indeed.
And that's Baltimore Street. So effectively the fire truck could just be on the street overlooking the building. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. The fire, pardon me for elaboration. When a fuel store is on fire, you fight the fire from the street. But you need a fire truck in there to enter the front of the property and ingress in case of an ill patient or a patient that needs to be taken in an ambulance. The fire truck fights fire from the street.
What is the grade difference between the property as it is now and Baltimore Street? How much higher is Baltimore Street than the
Mr.
ground level of where the building is going to be in the new plan?
Mr. Burns, I eyeballed it. I didn't survey it, but I eyeballed it about 3 feet. And that ground can be retained by a vertical wall, not impacting the 5 feet that we are asking for.
So the property will be leveled up to the property line. How far between the edge of the road of Baltimore Street and this 3-foot drop off at the retaining wall?
Well, the property line shore here is not the limit of the road. There's a buffer. There's a curb line out there. I would estimate 5 to 10 feet away from the rear lot line. So if you count space in public land, you have 5 to 10 feet outside, and in private land, you have 5 feet. I would say 10 to 15 feet is plenty adequate.
Okay. Well, my concern is the sudden drop off next to the road on Baltimore Street. But so the space between that retaining wall that you will put in and the edge of Baltimore Street, what's going to be there?
I think we'll come to 5 feet.
No, I mean, what is anything gonna be built there? Is gonna be a guardrail? Is gonna be a fence? Is there gonna be trees?
Well, first you will have a lower deck sidewalk, and that will have to be concreted for pedestrian access.
Mhm.
And then there will be a wall, and on top of the wall, there has to be a safety rail.
Okay. And again, I think the concern of the members of the board with regard to fire department access isn't so much the fighting of a fire, but the access to the building from all angles. And so your testimony is that the standard for safe access to the rear of the building is 3 feet, and this is 5 feet. Is that correct?
It is 3 feet pedestrian access.
Okay. And so there will be between that retaining wall and the back wall of the building, just 5 feet, or is there going to be more than that back there?
Well, the retaining wall will use up a good 8 inches
Okay,
of the 5 feet. So I have 4'2" clearance.
okay. A little bit less than 5 feet.
Yeah.
And the property that abuts, and that is with Baltimore Street, that's partially owned by the county, is that correct?
I think it's wholly owned by the county.
Wholly owned by the county.
Baltimore Street is a town road. We do own the road, but that is the government's property.
And so the sports field across the street is county
Correct.
property.
Yes.
And
I'm actually going to have them bring up the Google Street View, and you
Oh,
can see it's actually much more of a gentle slope than you might imagine.
that's one of those things that I drive past almost every day and never really notice. Does anybody else have any questions so far?
Well, speaking from my own experience, being a retired battalion chief and a current fire marshal, I'm still not very comfortable with that 5-foot access that you want to leave. Is there a way you can adjust that to not quite leaving 5 feet, you leave more than 5 feet?
Would you allow us to deal with this technicality when you review the plan?
So
Will you
if-
review the plans before?
If
I mean, well, that's the sole question before the board today is whether to grant the special exception to, is that not, I'm not moving into decision
No,
making.
the issuance is a variance.
Variance, I'm sorry.
And-
You already have the
and-
special
And
exception.
it's just basically, think of it like creating an envelope. This is the envelope you're allowed to work in, and then he'll have to come back and say, this is what I'm going to fit in this envelope. At that point in time, that is where discussion is had to confirm that you've got the 3 foot or the 5 foot and whatever wiggle room is required or demanded or negotiated.
And your team will look at the plan in detail.
We do, when we do the building permit process, the Office of the State Fire Marshal does our commercial reviews. So they will have to review and approve the building and the layout.
And when Charles Street was widened, and they added the ingress and egress on Charles Street to the property, did that also impact the corner? Was the sort of the right-hand merge lane onto northbound, 301, was that part of that adjustment there?
If I can answer the best of my knowledge, yes. Then when that occurred, having grown up here, and I remember back when Route 6 was just a single lane, and then now if you have the 3 lanes, and all of that took off of what used to be, I'll age myself, Eagle Chevrolet, back when it was a car dealership.
You can, and when you look at the site plan that they provided, there is the 10-foot here, and you can see the kind of outline of where the curb is. So that merge lane is a part of that 10-foot expansion.
And that was, at some point, the reason I'm asking is that at some point, the offsets on this property were significantly farther away from the buildings than they are now. But when the road moved, the offsets had to move as well, correct? Or the front offset, the setbacks from the front.
Yes, you
Correct.
consistently, if you take 10 feet of road, then you move back 10 more feet.
And if you notice, if I may speak, in this drawing that I've shown you, there is a public sewer from Baltimore Road running right through that property in the red zone.
I noticed that too. I don't have any other questions at this point. Does anybody else have any?
Since you got the Google up, could you arrow to the right side of that car wash? And go to the right.
There we go. There's the sewer.
Is the property, just so I understand the difference here, is the private property for this Dash in Exxon, is include that tree line, or is that government?
It includes the tree line.
The property, okay, so the property does include that tree line, which means
That sewer. It's gonna be in the way.
Well, the trees will be removed as part of the plan as it is now.
Yes, the
Okay.
trees will be moved. We will prepare a detailed landscape plan as required by Janine's staff and others.
And how are we gonna deal with that sewer sticking up? Because that looks like it's gonna impede into your requested 5 feet.
No, the sewer, if you look at this red line plan that I've shown you, the building is away from the sewer line. So that top of the sewer will have to be adjusted flush with grade.
So that's gonna be lowered down to fit with the.
Yes,
Do we know where is that from the county office building?
it is from the street, Baltimore Street. Take a look at.
Is it a storm drain or a sewer line?
It's a storm sewer drain.
Any further testimony?
I would just, anything else?
No, I don't have.
Yeah, I would just like to summarize if there are any other questions, but I just want to reiterate effectively, and I appreciate all the effort and time and thought going into it, and they're all good questions. Today, we're just asking for the envelope, the permission to look at the envelope. Granting the variance today does not change what happens at the property tomorrow. It's there. The car wash is there, the pumps are there. What the process hereafter would be the submittal of site plans and the whole review and fitting it within the envelope. The request today is simply to get that envelope to a spot that we can maneuver within. We did not, and I was prepared to go through all 12 or all 8 elements of the staff of my report and the requirements of the zoning ordinance. I think Mr. Prakash hit each one of those elements. And I think that it is clear, hopefully to this board, that our proposed variance is not contrary to the public interest. It specifically is going to be helpful to the public for safety, for the store employees, pedestrians, and consumers. That I think is important. The proposed variance is not going to permit Dashin to make a use that's not otherwise permitted. They're going to continue with the same special exception use as permitted in 92. That the use, the 25-foot setback is not a use that's generally shared by other lands or buildings in the area. This property is unique. It has 2 fronts. It's on the corner. It's the only one on that corner. I think that hopefully we satisfied you all that this variance request is not self-created or self-imposed. This was the envelope that's over time been shrunk as a result of government widenings of roads and streets and those types of matters. And finally, that our request is not based on greater profitability or lack of knowledge. We're here, this existing store has been in this format since the early 1990s. And the Dashin is wanting to rebuild it, rebrand it, make it better, make it more user-friendly, and to bring something to the town. So we request your favorable approval for the variance, and I appreciate your concerns. We've heard your concerns, but those most are, in my mind, a site plan and a development plan matter. Today, we're asking for the permission to develop something within the envelope.
Okay.
Sure. Well, let me do this. I have the town clerk enter the written documents into the record at this time.
The written documents submitted by the applicant are entered into the record, and there have been no other documents submitted to be written into to the record at all. Nor item 3.8, are there anyone in person or online to provide public comment?
And so if there are, as Mr. Clerk indicated, there are no other members of the public present in the room or online, so we'll move on past public comment. And does the board have any additional questions or statements?
I do.
Yes.
Just to ease my mind just a little bit. So we know that there's not going to be any additional entrance into this off of Baltimore Street, correct?
The concept plan doesn't intend
Right.
to change any ingress or egress to the site.
The second issue is, you're talking about a retaining wall behind the building, right?
I mean, ultimately it's a site plan issue, whether it all depends on his grade and whether it's 2 levels up or 3 levels up.
Yeah, no, my only concern is, like I said, we're going to shorten that distance to do that, right, for the variance. My concern is, and I love La Plata, but I gotta be honest and say that we've had our share of accidents, especially on 301, especially on 6, or go up to Hawthorne. That's pretty much where all of our accidents are happening. I just want to make sure that there's some type of protection with a reduction in space between Baltimore and this building. Someone's not coming off and going into the back of that building. Does that make sense?
If I can rephrase the question, the concern is if you come down Baltimore Street from the
Right.
county building, is there going to be a scenario where a a car is going to run into the building?
Well, there's no evidence yet that the car has run into those trees.
Correct. But we're talking about removing them trees. Now you're talking about removing something that would possibly stop. It'd be a safety measure to stop someone from doing that.
There is a way to prevent cars from entering the building from the rear. And that is to build up the retaining wall by another 3 feet,
That's
which effectively serves as a guardrail.
right. That's what I was looking for. And I think, I'm sorry, one last thing is, and I think because of my background, throwing this in here is, I'm not just concerned about the 5 feet or 4 feet 8 inches that we're talking now behind the building for fire department. I also look at things in a risk management perspective of an active shooter. People getting out the back of that building if someone's in the front shooting. And you're gonna have you ever been inside one of those buildings when you see people trample over each other to get out, and now you're talking about only 4 feet for them to get out? That was my concern when we were talking about the fire department, or the distance between when your door swings open, which cuts off about another 2.5 feet on where those people are going. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
That was it. I mean, just taking that into consideration. It has nothing to do with what we're talking here tonight. It's just my personal
Right.
being with safety. That's all.
I just would respond quickly to that. Solving the moving of this building to the rear, allowing the full view facade, that is going to be much better scenario than as it says today.
Oh, I agree. Completely agree.
And I think your concerns didn't fall on deaf ears, and Mrs. Montgomery is sitting behind me and she heard it. I think that, I think the town will see a very nice plan come through, and hopefully we'll address all concerns.
We do
So-
have the volunteer fire department review our site plans and the fire marshal review the building permits. So there will be 2 means of fire review.
Is there any more questions from the board?
Just mind the overhead obstructions. Because as you get close to that tree line, I saw the overhead obstructions. Remember, firemen carry aluminum ladders
They're on the
to the
Charles
rear of
Street
the
side
building.
too,
Yeah,
and on 301 side.
yeah, yeah. That's
All
all.
right. If there's no further questions, I propose that the board approve the application for variance. I think that the factors from 181-54 have been met by the application. I think, as council indicated, This is not contrary to the public use and intent of the property. I think especially enlightening is the fact that this building was built prior to current ADA codes, and this will bring it into compliance with that. I think that obviously the use is already permitted. It's been permitted for 40 years. Although I hate to say that that's been 40 years since 1992. I'm sorry, 30 years. I didn't go to law school because I was good at math, but I think the main issues that the board were concerned with were the fact that this issue is not shared. Is this issue shared by other properties nearby? And I think that it is, but I think it's the corner properties have a unique situation in this position. And all four corners have probably been through the exact same problem, and they all have different uses. So when the town and the county and the state removed significant portions of the property to put them under asphalt as part of Charles Street, that created this problem for the property. And it was nothing that the property did on its own to limit the buildable space in the property. So this is not a self-imposed hardship. This is not, again, the example that I would use is if you were not permitted to build an accessory inside that 25-foot zone and you had built it and you were coming for a variance after the fact, I'd be less sympathetic. But that's not what we're doing here. We're talking about redesigning the entire property. And I guess the question before the board today is only whether or not to grant the variance for the back setback. And I think that we should approve the variance based on that. I think that the board's concerns are legitimate with regard to the issues that were raised, but they would come before us again in a future hearing, depending on what happens with the planning and permitting process. We'll be able to address those at a potential future hearing, but at this point, I don't see any reason to deny the variance. And I guess I interpret the final that it's not based on greater profitability or lack of knowledge. It's already a gas station. It's still going to be a gas station. You're not changing it to a completely different. It's not going from a farm to a factory, which is what I think that factor really applies to. But I would imagine that you hope the gas station to become more profitable than it is now by redesigning it. But I don't think that's the kind of issue that we're looking here. So I would move to approve the variance based on those facts. And I would call for a vote from the board. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So it's unanimous. I will direct the town clerk and the town attorney to draft me the order as we have done in the past, and the board will then receive that. We will review the order in another session and issue the order forthwith as soon as possible. Is there any other business before the board tonight? Then at this time, I would move to adjourn the meeting. And again, I apologize for being late. I had my signals crossed about when the meetings were and where. We haven't done them in person in a long time. But I'm glad to be back, and thank you to the other members of the board for your patience with me. And to the folks who are here.
Second adjournment.
Do I have to move? I moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. In favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Little rough.